Hey, Taylor Elwood here with the Men's Mysteries, and I'm super excited. I have on here David Boyd, from the president of Uncivilized. I'm happy to have you here, David. Please introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. I really appreciate the opportunity to connect again, come on the podcast. I know we've had several, interactions over the last year or so of you getting involved with our organization, and so to get to come on and talk about what we do and how we do it is a great privilege. But for those who might not know me, my name's Dave Boyd. I am the president of Uncivilized Incorporated, and I'm also the executive director of our new nonprofit wing, Project Uncivilized, which is the home for all of our free public men's groups and community service projects and scholarship programs and all sorts of fun things that are going to be coming in the future to help men and help save lives. At the end of the day, it's Suicide Prevention Month right now here in the U.S. And a big reason that I personally am involved in men's work is because I've been the man that was real close, and I've been losing friends to suicide since high school, unfortunately, and trying to do something about it. That's kind of my mission in the world is to impact male suicide rates and end suffering in men and end the suffering that men cause because they are hurting as well. So, a little bit of background, you can probably see behind me if you're watching the video version of this. I've got an Eagle Globe and Anchor on the wall and some firefighting stuff, and I was in law enforcement. So I spent about 2 decades in uniform before I got involved in men's work. Um, and went back to school and developed my education in psychology and coaching and continuing to grow as a leader and facilitator through that whole process.
Yeah,
But
you've
husband, father, mountain biker, CrossFitter, all sorts of fun things outside of the work sphere as well.
you've done a lot of stuff. It's been really impressive. And speaking as that man who's also been very close to who's been in that space of being suicidal before, I really appreciate the work that you do. It's one of the reasons that I feel called to men's work as well. There's a lot of men out there who really need to know that they're not alone and
Yeah.
that what they're going through isn't something that's all that unique. And so that's why this work is so important. So yeah, we have a little bit of a history now. I went through the Uncivilized Leadership Crucible with which you led, which was a really powerful, dynamic experience. And in fact, 2025 has been the year of leadership for me. And I've definitely gotten to experience different strands and flavors of leadership throughout. So, and that was one of them, and definitely a really powerful experience. And then more recently, I went to the How to Be a Danger, Not Dangerous workshop, which was co-taught by you and I forget his name.
Robert Wonderlick, another
Yeah,
wonderful,
yeah, another
wonderful
one.
uncivilized leader.
Yeah, Robert, and that was also a really powerful experience. So I wanted to talk a bit about those experiences, but also just talk about Uncivilized in general. I've interviewed Trevor before on this show, so we talked about he and we talked about his book that still hasn't fully come out yet. I'm still waiting for my copy, darn it.
It's coming. It's coming.
It's
I
coming. I
promise.
know. Yeah, I know. But that was a really solid interview, and I really appreciate Uncivilized. I've been involved in the Uncivilized Nation for the last year or so, and happy to have re-upped and be part of it again because I think it's really solid work. But I'm kind of curious. Let's first of all explore your definition of leadership. What's your personal definition of leadership, and how does that apply in your life, both in terms of leading yourself and how you show up in your relationships and in your professional capacity.
Yeah, you know, I've had a lot of definitions of leadership over the years, right? Like in the Marine Corps, there was like the leadership like attributes. It's an acronym. JJ did tie buckle, and it's things like justice and judgment and those kinds of things. And then I left the military and was like, okay, kind of had that existential crisis a little bit of like, who am I now? Away from all of this, and so transition into public safety, and then I think really that's where I learned of a lot of my personal leadership style and philosophy. Um, but nowadays, I try to keep it really simple. Service is leadership to me, right? Whether that is service to others or it's service to myself. I think a lot of times men, we want to be of service, but we forget how to be of service to ourselves through things like working out and meditating and having a men's group and, having hobbies and having friends and all of those things. And so being of service needs to be external and internal. And if I look at most things through in life through that lens of service, I can usually find a way that's going to help me, feed my passion, feed my purpose, make an impact, and help myself grow and change through the whole process. So I like to keep it real simple. My leadership definition is service, and from there it can go all sorts of different ways where it needs to.
I think you hit on a really key point there, which is being of service to yourself first and foremost, so that you can be of service to other people. One of the things that I see talked about a lot in Uncivilized, and certainly something I've talked a lot about, is nice guy behavior.
Hmm.
And being a recovering nice guy myself, I know that what I've done is I've bent over backwards, become the carpet that people have walked on, the bathroom rug. And in the process, like not really advocated for myself and been full of anger and resentment over the matter. And that doesn't feel like genuine service. It just feels more like I'm waiting for my reward. Here I am doing all these things. Why aren't you looking out for me and taking care of me the way that I'm taking care of you? Whereas service to myself is, okay, I'm going to take care of myself first. It doesn't mean I won't be open to you taking care of me, but I'm actually choosing to value and respect myself enough to do what I need to do for me so I can choose how I should show up to you.
Yeah, no, as fellow recovering nice guy, here in the seat today too. And I've done a lot of looking at the nice guy behavior, and I think, um, especially guys like myself that come from the military, come from public safety, we have a lot of that self-sacrifice, which comes in just like regular nice guy tendencies. And so that was like a different lens that I've really had to focus on it lately, or in the last few years. Just kind of had this epiphany of like, man, most of us aren't like, yeah, we're big badass guys doing crazy stuff and serving others, but there's so much self-sacrifice and so many ways that you don't think about, like how you dressed and what you wear and what tattoos you can have and can you have a beard and all of those things that go into those career fields. And so many of us don't recognize it as like sacrificing ourselves or sacrificing our authenticity. We're just like, well, it's part of the job. But at the end of the day, it's really controlling who we are, how we show up in the world, what we believe, um, all of those things. And I 100% agree. Like one of the biggest changes in my life personally, post uniform, is the ability to choose, right? Is the ability to be authentic, right? Like I had major knee surgery this year and I have a hot pink ACL brace on. And people are like, why do you have a hot pink brace? I'm like, because pink's my favorite color. Screw off. Like it's none of your business. I like my pink brace and I'm going to wear it. Um, and being able to show up in those ways every day is huge, especially as a recovering nice guy and a guy who's still trying to make his way in the world. If this is who I am, I'm proud of it. And if you don't like it, you can fuck right off because there's other people out there in the world that will appreciate who I am for that.
So one of the ways I see this coming out as well is by honoring our yeses and our nos.
Mm.
So how does that show up in your life or in your work? Like how do you go about ensuring that you're honoring your yes to yourself and also honoring your no to others and maybe even to yourself as well?
That's a great question. Great question. That was a big learning process for me over the last decade or so, honestly, Taylor. If you're familiar with human design, I went and had my human design done by a coach up in Boulder. And I came back as a generator, and she was like, you have to learn how to trust your gut. You have to learn what really is happening inside of you when you agree to something or when you say no to something. Not just the like, in your head, like what do you feel in your body when something is in alignment with what you want? And it was like what she told me back in the day. She was like, you'll know. It's like things are either going to be an instinctual like mm-hmm or an instinctual uh-uh. And that should be really, really clear to you if you're actually paying attention and you're not just like self-sacrificing because that's your MO of I will take it all on, I will take care of it no matter what. And so am I perfect at it? Absolutely not. There are definitely times that I still fall into nice guy behavior and want to be loved and want to be uh, seen and cared for because I'm sacrificing who I am or what I believe. But it's an everyday practice. It's an everyday practice, and sometimes I get it right, and sometimes I get it wrong, um, and that's okay. Both are a learning lesson. Both are a learning lesson for my nervous system and breaking past neural pathways and behaviors.
I think my biggest lesson around that has been learning to just really speak up for myself and to really acknowledge like when something feels off or out of alignment, being able to make the choice to say, okay, this isn't the right fit for me. What is? And choosing to say yes, not because I'm going to get someone else's approval, because that's a pretty empty experience. I mean, I found
Mhm.
that when I chased after people's approval, even when I got a sip of that approval, it was never enough.
Yeah. It's never enough because you immediately move the goalpost like another 100 yards down the field, right? Of like, well, they liked me for this moment and I got a great dopamine hit, but they're gonna stop liking me any second now. I know it, so I need to do something again. Let's keep driving down the field. I definitely understand that, Taylor.
Yeah, so it's been I think that's probably one of the most powerful lessons I've learned in regards to just being able to say yes to myself and no to other people. And sometimes, as I said, saying no to myself as well, because sometimes the reason I'm saying no to myself is because I would otherwise be saying yes to someone else that I and not from an authentic place.
Yeah, yeah. I think when I'm trying to remember the quote, it's like uh, if you say yes to everything, then your yes doesn't really mean anything, right? You have to have like an equal amount of yeses and nos and I will or I won't in your life in order to make things actually meaningful. Um, it's also like the if everything's the most important, then nothing's the most important. Kind of that same concept.
So one of the aspects that I found really powerful about Uncivilized is, we have this model of real, raw, and relational. And I want to focus in on the relational bit because I think a lot of people can relate to the real and the raw, but the relational is something that I still think is not as present in men's work in general
Hmm.
as it could be.
I would, man, if you saw my Instagram feed, Taylor, the amount of men's work organizations that I follow that pretend to be Navy SEALs or Army Rangers for the weekend, um, I could talk about this part all day. So sorry, just uh, it's interesting. That's the direction we're headed.
Well, I mean, I'll comment on that and just say that I'm not interested in performative men's work. That's what that strikes me as. Like, I think that it's less about trying to live up to an image of masculinity and more about figuring out like what does it mean to really be me. But then relationally, like I think about it from like what the question I have here is like what do you see as being relational in men's work? Like, what's an area where men can like work on that and improve on that? Because I think that that's something that's starting to come more into the forefront. We're starting to move out of the I focus is what I kind of see, and more toward the how can I be more connected to people around me? Still advocating for I, but not letting that be the central focus of everything.
I think that one of the biggest things that is coming out of, I think, the modern men's movement, that we're Uncivilized is obviously a part of, um, is authenticity, like you mentioned. It's no longer this prescription of this is what it means to be a man. This is how you show up as a man, right? Like, are there some pretty universal tenets across the planet for masculinity, right? Like strength and leadership and, you know, holding the container or being the mountain, whatever word you want to use for it. But there's so many ways to be a man. And like every one of them is important, right? Like I have a coaching client that he likes flowers. He has a flower tattoo, and I have a flower tattoo. And I'm like, people can talk shit about that and say, well, that's wussy. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm a former MMA fighter, SWAT officer, and can deadlift 600 pounds. Like, you want to fight about it? Uh, right? Like, I don't need I don't need somebody else to approve of how I live my life as a man. I need to approve how I live my life as a man and how I get to show up authentically, because the more authentically I get to show up, the more relational I'm actually going to be. Right? Dewey Freeman talks about authenticity over versus attachment, right? And if I'm not, and for those who aren't familiar with that term, right? Like nice guys, recovering nice guys, we sacrifice who we are in order to gain attachment or relationship, in another word. But that version that we've presented of ourselves is not authentic enough to create a real secure attachment. That other person that we're entering in a relationship with is getting this curated version of us, and that's not real. So you can't actually develop a healthy, secure attachment if you don't get to show up and be real in those relationships. Real, authentic, interchangeable, whatever word you want to use there. And I think the more we create space for men to show up authentically, to show up raw, to show up real, the more relationship healthy relationship, secure relationship will develop out of that. You will find your people. It's not like 1,000 years ago or even 100 years ago where you're stuck with the people that are within 10 miles of you for the rest of your life, right? I mean, you're in Oregon right now and I'm in Colorado and we're having a great conversation. It's not, you can find your people now. It doesn't have to be the way it used to be where you need to change in order to fit somebody else's dynamic of what they believe you should be.
So my next question is, we talked about personal definitions of leadership, but what's relational leadership?
So when I think about relational leadership, right? Mentioning Dewey Freeman again, he's my mentor. If anybody doesn't know that, Dewey has
He's
the
one of mine too.
yeah,
Also, I'll
the,
just mention.
the I, thou, we model of relationship, right? Like, and that means that my experience of the world is just as and equally as important as your relationship in the world. But then there's also this curated thing in between us, right? The relationship that Taylor and I have, beyond this podcast, or the relationship that my wife and I have, and the relationship that my kids and I have, or anybody else in my life, right? Is that I'm also tending to that piece as well. I'm tending to the we of our relationship, not just like the task, the conversation that needs to have, the bill that needs to get paid, the lawn that needs to get cut, right? It's more about, for me, it's more about how that person is showing up, what their experience is, and then what's happening in between us and that magical, mystical space of the we and the energetic space in between us of we. What's happening in there? But it comes back to, again, to service for me, you know? How do I serve this relationship? How do I serve this other person that I care about, that's important to me, that their experience of me is important? How can I give them the things that they might not have received previously in relationship with other people? How do I show up for them? How do I help heal their wounds to the best of my ability in that space? If my experience in life can help lead them through a difficulty from their past that's still showing up by showing up for them in the way they didn't get met previously, like that's a big piece of relational leadership for me.
There's a concept from another organization that I'm involved with called the Evolutionary Collective, and they do a lot of really interesting consciousness explorations around we-ness and its mutuality. And I kind of think of this in regards to relational leadership. It's like, how do we mutually come together and connect
Mhm.
and as a result come to an understanding of each other and ourselves through that and through the we-ness, the relationship itself. So when I look at relational leadership, a lot of times what I really look at is how am I leading myself and at the same time being able to be fully present with this person without assuming that I need to lead them. It's letting go of the steering wheel in order to fully receive them and connect with them. And then from
Mhm.
there being able to move in the relationship.
I love
So
that. I love that.
yeah. And this kind of actually leads to a really something for me which has really been interesting. So earlier this summer, I went to How to Be a Danger, Not Dangerous workshop, which you and Robert taught. And I have been I've been integrating that experience in, and it's and we'll talk about this a little bit later. My recent experience with the deer in the car, because that was a moment where I really got to experience that how to be a danger, not dangerous thing in a very in aware in many different ways. But let's talk first about what that tenet is. It's in the uncivilized ethos. So what does it mean to be a danger as opposed to not dangerous for people who aren't familiar with that
Yeah.
ethos?
So be dangerous, but not a danger is probably my favorite, one of my favorite ethos tenets, right? Like as a former Marine, as a former SWAT cop, like all of those things, it's so central to who I am as a man is like my capacity to commit violence, right? Like I've been trained by Navy SEALs. I've been trained by the FBI hostage rescue team. I've been trained by Green Berets, like you name it on like the tier one level uh operator. I've worked with those guys. I've learned from those guys. And the most important thing that I learned is that like my capacity for violence and my capacity for self-control in the application of said violence are equally as important, right? And so in order for me to have that level of self-control, like I really have to know myself. I have to have put myself in difficult situations. I have to have tested myself and have been tested over and over and over and over again so that I know that when the time comes, like I'm confident enough that I can take care of business no matter what, right? Unless it's, you know, Thor, the guy who just deadlifted 510 kilograms for a new world record over the weekend, like unless it's that guy, right? Like who can just step on me and hold me down because he's 7 foot tall and 400 pounds. But like the vast majority of life situations, I know that I can handle. And so developing that ethos tenet, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot more self-reflection and self-awareness than most people think about, right? Like I spent 2 decades in uniform in Afghanistan and in the most dangerous places in North Carolina when I was a cop. Like in order to learn that level of self-awareness, of that level of self-control. Um, and the other piece too that a lot of people don't think about in there is like there's a like part of being dangerous but not a danger is empathy and it's compassion and it's relationship and it's the ability to see past what's happening right now to maybe see what happened before we got there. Um, and so it's like I said, it's probably my favorite ethos tenet. It's the one that I've spent the vast majority of my life developing the skill set in order to be effective at as well.
On the workshop, I think that what I appreciated was that there was this really intriguing balance between physical activity. I mean, we were lifting, we were squatting, we were doing burpees, we were doing a little bit of we were doing some interesting a little bit of martial arts, kind of, like throwing punches and things like that, but not like necessarily boxing each other or anything like along those lines, but just getting into it. And I think what I appreciated about that was getting pushed, like physically pushed to a place where it's like, okay, this is what it feels like when you're really pushed this way. I've certainly experienced that in my martial arts training, but I liked it. But then mixing it in with, well, like, how do you apply this to your life? So first, I want to know, when's the next workshop going to be for anybody out there who would like to take this? Because I highly, Taylor stamp of approval, recommend it.
Thanks, Taylor. I appreciate that. Honestly, Robert and I have not planned the next one. It will be during 2026 at some point, but we have not put a date on the calendar yet. But it will be happening again. Just keep an eye out. If you haven't subscribed to the newsletter, subscribe to the Man Uncivilized newsletter. Keep an eye on the events page there or on Instagram. There will be an announcement eventually, though. I'd like to get things rolling before Black Friday so we can get something on the calendar as well. So, and we'll have a great deal for Black Friday. So.
Well, yeah, and I took advantage of the Black Friday deal last year. So, for that as well as for the Uncivilized Leadership Crucible. So, highly recommend both.
Thanks,
But
sir.
I think that like what stood out to me. So, I'm going to share a little bit of my story now. A couple weeks ago, I'm driving home from Canada. I was visiting my sweetheart, and I'm driving down State Route 25 in Washington, and it's daylight, and out comes a deer. hops across the road, and then the other one comes out and hits my car. Now, the reason the deer were out during the daytime, because most times you wouldn't think they would be, because it was harvest season. So they're getting disturbed by what's going on there. So I'm in the middle of nowhere. It's rural Washington. I moved my car over to the side of the road. And, luckily I had a signal, called AAA, and then this local fireman came by and he towed my car down to a safer place because he's like, you're actually kind of in a dangerous place along the highway here. People come by. So he got me to an off-road area. And then I got my car towed down to Davenport, Washington, which is this little rural town. And over the course of two of the next couple days, I got to really explore what it was like to be in a very uncomfortable situation where I had very little control. I didn't know anyone in that town. My car was 2 miles away on a farm, and the guy where it was like, I can't help you with that. And the body shop that he gave me to call, their number was disconnect. Like their number was like, this number's not in service.
Oh man, the perfect storm. The perfect storm.
The perfect storm. So I was definitely in this place where I was like having to really be fully in that. And I think the biggest lesson I got out of it was I had to take my hands off the steering wheel because I was like holding on for dear life, both metaphorically and literally.
Yeah.
I had to take it off and let go and surrender to the experience in order to get to the place where I could quote unquote be a danger, or maybe it's dangerous, whichever, but to the point where I could figure out what I was going to do next and how I was going to get to Spokane, Washington and get to my rental car and move from there. And it took a little bit of planning, but a large part of it was that I was being able to receive the kindness of other people. Like I had a guy make me a free sandwich at the Subway. My beloved found me the only place in town the only Airbnb in town, so I actually had a place to stay because literally the motel that I was going to go to, they only had one motel. They didn't have any rooms because they had a rodeo in town.
Oof.
So it was
Man.
like all these different things, and the biggest part was learning to actually let go of the need to be in control of everything around me so that I could come to that place of self-control, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it comes back to that, what I mentioned before is like that ability to be confident enough in your capacity to handle whatever comes your way, right? Whether it's a fist fight or it's a being stranded in, you know, middle of nowhere, Washington, while you wait for your car situation to get sorted. Like having the confidence to handle what you need to handle is what makes you dangerous, but not a danger. And I think that personally, a well-rounded man should be able to throw a punch, should be able to take a punch, should be able to change a tire, some of those more traditionally masculine things, if you will. But those are the things that are going to help keep you safe, right? I also, I've learned how to sew, right? Like learning how to sew isn't going to keep me safe in the vast majority of things, but I can put a button on and I can fix my pants when they rip, and that helps me be able to take care of myself and have confidence in who I am and what I can do and what I can handle on a day-to-day basis. And that translates into, oh, I'm sitting at a restaurant and a guy walks in who's being an asshole. Like, can I keep my family safe? Can I keep myself safe? If it gets really bad, can I keep everybody else in that restaurant safe? I can. I can. Does every man need to have that capacity? I don't think so. But there needs to be one in every room, and it might as well be you.
Yeah. I think that's really important. And I think at the same time, like what I came out of that from that experience was how important it was to just to be able to ask for help. That was actually in some ways one of the most quote unquote dangerous things that I could do. And the dangerous thing about it was I was putting myself out there and saying, look, I need help.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself was it was in a real sense like could I be safe enough with myself to ask for that help as opposed to just doing the stoic I got to figure this out and white knuckled all on my own.
Yeah. I totally agree, man. I think that the some of the most dangerous men out there are the men who haven't done the work, who haven't pushed themselves, who haven't tested themselves, right? Like if we look around at like let's go back to our early 20s here for put our time machine on and like who's the guy that's out there getting in a fight outside the bar, right? It's like It's the guy who's ready to like rip off his shirt and show off his six pack abs. But I'm more worried about the guy, the quiet guy at the bar who's just kind of watching everything take place, right? Like that's the smart move if we're looking around for who's actually dangerous. Like that guy's tested himself. That guy's confident in himself. But the guy who's ripping his shirt off, screaming like "Let's go," more than likely, unless he's fighting another guy who's ready to take his shirt off and scream "Let's go," like that guy's probably going to get his ass kicked, right? He's get if he's going up, especially if he's going up against that silent guy at the bar. Um, like have you have to put yourself in difficult situations, and even if just in training, right? Even if it's just at the gym, even if it's at martial arts, putting yourself in those situations that will test who you are, test your capacity, right? Like that's what keeps you from tipping into the being dangerous and a danger instead of dangerous but not a danger. And so really, really having the courage to say, "Hey, I need help," to not white knuckle it, to not try something that's out of your depth, to not, you know, to not try to swing the sledgehammer that's 40 pounds too heavy for us, and then hurting ourselves and creating another victim, right? Uh, that's I think it's so important to have the humility, to have the self respect, the self compassion, the empathy in order to say, I'm over my head. I need some help. I think that that's a huge piece. I'm really glad you brought that into it, Taylor.
Yeah, well, and it's something I've been reflecting on a lot since I took the workshop. I think that what was really transformative for me about that workshop is it really gave me a moment to kind of reflect as well. Like, what does it look like to be in a situation where I'm dangerous? What does it look like to be in a situation where I'm a danger? And what does it look like to see that with other men or other people in general, organizations? I mean, I looked at it from the whole perspective afterwards because it was like, well, it, it was this embodied somatic experience on the one hand, getting pushed. And it's kind of like right now, I'm pushing myself with getting ready for my green belt test. So I'm going through all the belts, doing all
Mhm.
the things because, I've got to get ready for it. But then it's also that, well, how else in my life, where in my life am I settling and quote unquote getting to a place where maybe I'm dangerous because I'm settling, because I'm not being honest, I'm not being authentic, I'm not being relational. Or where am I actually like really looking at things and saying, no, I'm not going to settle. I know myself and my capacity, and this is what I'm worth. And that was what that workshop really taught me to look at in a different light than I had before. That I think more men need is that opportunity to see, well, what is it like to be uncomfortable enough to say something needs to change here?
Mm. That's a That's a difficult thing for I think a lot of men because when we get a lot of men, right? Like when we get uncomfortable or we feel like we're out of our depth, like our ego kicks in and then it's like, well, I need to be hyper masculine or I need to have some sort of bravado and I need to figure it out no matter what. Um, and it's like learning to be comfortable in the uncomfortable or comfortable in the chaos. Like push yourself to that limit and say, okay, like that was my limit today, and I'm okay with that being my limit today. But tomorrow I can push it 0.01% further, right? Like you didn't have to be a CrossFit athlete. You didn't have to be a black belt in order to come to the workshop. Like we met you where you were, we worked with you where you were, no matter what. Like I don't really care as long as you're willing to be there and show up and be, become a better version of yourself and learn how to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And not only that, but being able to reflect afterwards to have the imagination, which I think is super important. So many men get cut off from their ability to imagine a different way of living that they can't produce a new way of living, right? So it's like if you don't have the imagination to say that I'm not going to settle for this and this is what I will accept or what I'm going to push towards, then you're never going to be able to create an action plan to even get to that part. You're going to stay stuck in this, uh, I'm inadequate, I don't know how to do it, shame spiral, um, and never take those steps forward that you want.
So you hit on something I want to ask you about now, which is really fascinating, which is not being able to imagine. So why do you think it is that so many men have that issue with imagination? I mean, I have my own thought on it, which I'll share in a moment, but I'm curious as to what your thought is.
So we kind of have this saying like that men get cut off from their heart and women get cut off from their voice, right? I'm sure people have heard that are listening. Um, and I think imagination has a lot to do with heart. Um, I think that if we are cut off and we are socialized to or socialized or raised, whatever term you want to use, to fit the mold, right? Like, and that nothing outside the mold is acceptable, then there's no reason to have an imagination. There's no reason for a man to say, I want something different. I want this out of my life, right? Like, I never imagined personally, you know, 10, 12 years ago that I'd be moving across the country and running a men's movement and run workshops and all the things that I get to do now and have that privilege. But it took me being willing to say, this isn't the life I want. This is the life I want, and I'm going to chase it. And my imagination gets to run wild with it, right? Like, I've got right next to me like my crappy drawing of my vision board, with the big uncivilized ranch and the truck and the airplane and the mountain bikes and all the things, right? And I look at that every day. Every day when I sit down here next to it, I look at it and I'm like, what do I need to do? What do I need to imagine in order to make that a reality? Um, but it took me learning how to connect back in with myself, being willing to give myself permission to think about life differently, right? When Traver and I first met, I was a private client and he had me write a permission slip. Literally, like I took my Write in the Rain notepad and I wrote the word permission on it. And I had to carry that permission slip with me everywhere I went. And like if I had that little bit of a fear or a little bit of shame or guilt, I would like pull it out or I would just like rub it in my pocket and be like, no, I have permission to live the life I want. I have the permission to imagine the life that I want and to pursue it. But I think overall, right? I think a lot of it's societal conditioning. I think there's definitely some trauma. Uh, Issues that come in around imagination, like little boys get shamed for having an imaginary friend, right? Or any of those kinds of things when we're real young and we learn to shut off connection to our heart, which is the source of our imagination, in my personal opinion. Um, so kind of a long answer, but kind of a
Well, no, that was basically kind of where I was going with it too. It's yeah, it is getting shut off from the heart. It's getting shut off from that capacity to wonder and imagine and especially I think when we're told that imagination is for children, or at a certain point that you're not even supposed to imagine anymore, like you're just supposed to settle or something like that. So I think that was yeah, thank you. That was a really good answer.
thank you.
So, where are things going from here for Uncivilized and for yourself? I saw that you recently came out with a new T-shirt in
Mhm.
regards to the National Suicide Month. So tell us a bit about that and like what your plans are moving forward.
Yeah. Um, so there's with the founding of the nonprofit, we're going in kind of two different but very similar directions. We're kind of parallel, if you will, where the for-profit is still going to continue to host all our big retreats and our workshops and all of those kinds of things. But the nonprofit, our goal here is to build a movement of 1 million men, right? Like that was the original goal of Uncivilized. And we're learning, or we've learned over the last, 8, 9 years that we need a different approach to reach 1 million men, right? So many men are living in survival mode, right? That they can't afford to take a week off work to travel to Colorado to pay to come to a big peak life experience, quote unquote, style of retreat or workshop, those kinds of things. And so we want to reduce and remove barriers to entry to men's work because we believe that every man should have access to a healthy, safe, masculine container, right? Where he can show up and he can be authentic and be himself. And so that's the driving force behind the nonprofit, right? Awareness around men's mental health, awareness around men's community, awareness around all of men's issues. And then here's a men's group in your local community that can help you with all of those things, right? Through structured conversations, through community service projects, through scholarship opportunities to come to the big peak life experience events, through the initiation, through the workshops, all those kinds of things to join the nation. Um, because it's really hard to become the man that you want to be if you're living paycheck to paycheck and you don't have any kind of resource. You don't have any outlet, a place to be you, a place to give and receive support. Um, and so that's kind of the direction that we're headed, right? Like the things that that Uncivilized Incorporated have has done is going to continue, right? We're going to keep doing workshops, we're going to keep doing retreats, we're going to keep doing all those things for men, and we want men's community to be in the local community, not just here in Denver, but in every community around the world. And right now we've got over 40 men's groups around the planet, and we're hoping to grow those. And we've got an initiative coming up for International Men's Day. We're gonna fight back a little bit, if you will. If you take a look at International Men's Day, which is November 19th this year, a lot over the last 5, 10 years, a lot of that has been, it's been memes, it's been jokes, it's been shaming. Like, isn't every day International Men's Day? Or like, men don't need another day to be in charge, right? Like all that kind of stuff. But what men really need on International Men's Day is a place to be men together, a place to have real, hard, honest conversations with each other. And so we are through the nonprofit. We've got a new initiative called One Day, One Cause, 1,000 Circles, um, which is we're going to be going live with later this week. It's been on the website, but we haven't really talked about it much. But for a $10 donation to the nonprofit, which helps keep the lights on, keeps the men's group running, keep the scholarship program running, you get access to a facilitator's guide to 3 questions, access to live training about how to lead a men's circle with Traver and I. And so there's lots of things you can get for a $10 donation and an opportunity to help other men, right? There's so many of us out there that are like, man, I wish I could do something. I don't know what to do though. It's an overwhelming problem, right? Like 79% of suicides in the US are men, right? And most of those men never ask for help. And it's like we all have a friend that we've probably lost to suicide, or like I started, like we almost were that man. And so all it takes is one dude to say, "Hey, let me text 2 friends. Do you want to have a conversation about manhood on November 19th with me?" It's that simple. It's not difficult. You don't got to be a coach. You don't got to be a therapist. You don't have to be a social worker in order to lead a men's circle. You just have to be willing to say, "Hey, I'll do it, and I'll hold the container. I'll ask the questions, and then we can all talk about it." So that's kind of what things that are coming up. We also want to get back into veterans and first responder retreat space, over the next year or two as well, and helping those guys out with their trauma and help get them on the right path to living the life that they want to as well.
That's awesome. I think that's really all of that sounds really fascinating and really important. I mean, the more I've kind of done a deep dive into this work myself the last couple of years, and especially this last year, and the deeper I go into it, the more I see just how important it is for men to have this work, and that if we, I'm not here for the jokes or the memes either. And I one time I was not because it was kind of like self-shame for being a man, but it's like anymore, it's like, no, we need to support each other and be there for each other. And that's how we create a healthier world. I do 100% believe that.
Me too, man. Me too. I'm glad you're a part of it. Glad you're a part of it.
So I'm gonna wrap up here. I respect your time but I really appreciate you being here. What I'd like to ask is if you could leave us with one final word or phrase of wisdom that we can carry with us today as we move forward into the day.
Mm. Mm. Be the man that the little boy inside you needs you to be,
Mm,
because he's still in there. Don't
yeah.
forget about him.
Mm, I feel that, brother. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Taylor. I appreciate the opportunity, sir.
All right. Well, and to all of you who are watching, check out the show notes below. You're going to see some notes in regards to Uncivilized and some of the stuff going on there. And I'll see you again for another episode.